All right, we are live. This is
Hello.
fun. We got Kevin Israel back with us today.
Nice. Good. Welcome, Kevin.
Yes, so exciting. I'm just changing the audience setting on my thing. So welcome everybody to Crossing the Streams. Excited to have you back. Oh, go ahead, Kevin. What's up?
I got my computer.
Kevin is freezing. Okay. Oh, you're
Strong production value.
strong. That did not. It didn't work, Kev. You flipped out there for a second.
We now have
anyway,
a Kevin avatar.
while everyone's dealing with that, welcome everybody to Crossing the Streams, where we answer the universal question: what should I be watching next?
Absolutely.
I just finished something, and now I've got to watch something else. Well, you've come to the right place. This is episode 93 of Crossing the Streams. Can you believe it? 93 hours of goodness on YouTube right
You
now.
had two Kevins there for a second.
Double the Kevin.
Wait, we got even more
the
Kevins.
sexy.
I don't even. Is that you, Kevin? Are you there?
I am here.
Oh, so you got it to work.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know what happened.
Quadrophony.
It's almost like I don't even know what's happening. But I'm happy. All right. So this is great. Kevin is back. So we are gonna let's kick off with let's get the theme song out of the way.
Yes.
Kevin, start us off there, buddy.
Here's the story of some lonely fellas who spend way too much time watching the TV. All of them have jobs and friends. Well, not really. Just between you and me.
Well done, sir. Rosner.
They made a live show out of their hobby. Every TV watcher's TV watching dream. Jeff, Ron, Sal, and Bob, and there's Howard. They called it Crossing Streams.
Run.
And then one day they went live on all the platforms. You could hear the people laugh and shout and scream. Still can't find another word that rhymes with platform. But man, we cross those streams. Here we go. We cross the streams.
We cross
the streams.
That's the way.
That's the way we do it. Here we cross the streams.
Da-da-bum-bum-bum. So
Killed it.
I was reminded. I was just thinking about it. The reason I originally had Bob write the theme song was most of the live productions would start with like a 30-second countdown clock to give people time to get on. And so I was like, I hate that. That is just the dumbest thing. There's got to be a better way to waste that time to get people time to kind of collect themselves. So that's how we solve that. Cutting edge is what I'm saying. Crossing the streams. Cutting edge.
Nice.
So we got a special guest, Kevin Israel, making his second appearance on Crossing the Streams.
Done.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Kevin, so what are you up to these days?
I am up to being a dad. Had a baby 10 months ago.
Nice.
And that's an all-consuming...
Looks like your body's bounced back.
Yeah, I shed the weight real quick. Yeah, so I've been doing the dad thing and stand up and trying to pay the mortgage.
Yeah,
Nice.
I see you all over with the stand-up show, so that is awesome. And Lee found your lift. You posted that on.
My big credit, my big claim to fame.
That was fun though. Hey Lee, hey everybody, what's up? Carmen, hello. Jerry, what's
Jerry's
going
back this
on?
week.
We got Ron trolling our show. Well, welcome back, Kevin. It is good to have you back. So, all right, so we got a good show for you today. Lots of fun, but first, let's put up we stand with Ukraine.
Still standing with Ukraine.
Still standing with Ukraine. I don't have an image, but we also are standing with the Jewish people in this wave of horrible anti-Semitism going across the United States right now.
Kanye.
And I will just say I'm usually the first one to scream and yell about the impact of big brands and their ability to kind of push their social agendas on us. But in this case, I'm just going to say, bravo, Adidas, bravo to doing what's right and responding to I think what you had to do and for doing the right thing. So good on you. I may go out and buy a pair of Adidas this week.
I know, right? And
Maybe
they
read
say
a
they cost
little about their history
Yeah,
before
I
you
know.
go.
Well,
and do
sure, they-
that.
oh,
I'm very familiar
they
with
were
Well,
formed-
then again,
yeah.
I own 3 Ford Edges in a row. So
I mean, they did, but Chrysler built the ovens.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
or
That's
Daimler.
true.
So it's one of those things. But Weight Watchers had the best tweet. I think Weight Watchers won it all. They tweeted, "Congrats to Adidas on losing 163 pounds."
That's
And the last
awesome.
I saw had over 20,000 retweets and over 150,000 likes.
That's amazing. I'm gonna
did
have
you
to find that one.
see? Did you see? He wandered in to Skechers corporate offices today.
Jewish
with
owned.
cameras. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jewish owned, first of all, with cameras to film unannounced, second of all. Like, what? Just nonsense.
They escorted him out.
Yeah.
I was on
Yeah.
vacation a couple weeks ago, and we kept seeing like younger people in these really horrible looking slip-on shoes. My wife and I kept being like, "What? Like we see them everywhere. What are those?" And it turned out they were the Yeezys they look like a melted marshmallow on your feet. And it made me feel so old because I was like, "What are these kids wearing today? These Yeezys."
I have to admit, there's a couple of different designs of them that I actually think are pretty cool and look ridiculously comfortable. No, I wouldn't buy them clearly now, obviously, but there are a couple of pairs that are pretty darn sweet.
I'm sure
Although
Crocs is very happy about all of this.
I am quite certain Crocs are happy.
Yeah,
So
I'm now
happy.
mildly affiliated with the Jordan brand.
So did
brand
you
loyalty?
did you guys finish up House of the Dragon?
I didn't. I never started it.
Oh, you never started it?
No,
Oh
it's,
my
I'm gonna
gosh.
catch. We'll binge it all at once instead of watching each
You
week.
can watch it finished, so you can.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can
It's
binge
finished.
it all.
First season's over. Listen. I just said I was talking about this with a buddy of mine that it's a slow build. I'm not going to lie. The first season is a little slow, but then again, first season of Game of Thrones was slow.
Yeah.
But boy, did it finish up strong, and holy cow, did it leave you like just frothing, ready for the official beginning of the dance of the dragons, so to speak. And I'm excited for the show. It's really well done.
See, I think the first season of Game of Thrones was some of the best TV and some of the best Game of Thrones we got out of all of the 8 or 9 seasons, whatever it was. This I didn't buy into right away because they still didn't, even after the 10 episodes. They didn't have great characters. Like there was nobody that I really cared about, or like even when the horrible thing happened in the last episode, I was like, all right. Like they didn't make me care about any of them, but the story and the intrigue was really good. They did that really. You really wanted, to hate people and to hate the situation, and they really made childbirth look terrible.
Yeah, oh my goodness,
God, yeah.
Kevin. Yeah, without wrecking anything for anybody, holy cow, did they make childbirth look terrible? So well done there. I agree with what you just said. I agree. I don't think it's great character development, but the storyline's excellent. I feel like they are following straight to the books, which is excellent, with a couple small little changes which are interesting. But if the books are true and they follow again with the storyline. Season 2 is going to be epic, so I'm excited for that.
That's always one of the issues, though, with watching a great series or even a great miniseries. One of my favorite watches, and I still rewatch it probably 2-3 times a year, is Band of Brothers from HBO. It was just an epic show with fantastic characters.
Yeah.
And then they did The Pacific, which was terrible. I've never rewatched it because there was, some of the footage from the Pacific of Guadalcanal and some of those types of things is amazing, but the characters are so nondescript that you just don't care about it at all, and it's tough to follow. So I just hated it. But
so I happen to have watched both those series too. And I've watched Pacific multiple times. I tend to agree with you. I think Band of Brothers is just a better show.
Yeah.
That being said, as a standalone, I think the Pacific does a nice job.
Yeah. Cinematography wise, it was excellent.
Yeah.
Just to you're gathering a totally different type of warfare, certainly. But it was.
And then before I forget,
Leslie
R.I.P. Leslie Jordan. I've
Mm.
never seen. I mean, I've seen. Like I watch trends on Twitter all the time. I've never seen an outpouring like for anyone like
Yeah.
there was for Leslie Jordan. I mean, it was like immediate. I just felt different for some reason. For maybe because it was just so unexpected, I think. But it
Has
just
anybody thought about Leslie Jordan in the past
No.
6 years?
well,
It's
you know,
like
Leslie Jordan's the kind of person I think you just always enjoy because he's in a lot. He's in that cat show. I just watched him in Con Man, Will and Grace. Like I think everyone loves him and doesn't remember where from necessarily.
Yeah, but I
'Cause
just think it's
he's just
funny.
everywhere.
These people
He's
will
just
kind of
everywhere.
fade in. These people will kind of fade into the background, and then when they pass away, suddenly everybody's like, "Oh my god, I love them so much! Like I've known you
Well, but in
15
all
years and I've
fairness,
never heard you mention."
nobody talks about everybody all the time.
I know,
I mean,
I
it's
know.
it's right. That's what sparks it. It's like that's just the moment. We couldn't talk about everyone all the time, then it wouldn't
it's
be.
it's like the equivalent, I feel, of like having one of your pets pass away. Like you almost cry more than when you lose like an aunt or an uncle, and just because for some reason it connects with you on a more emotional level. So it's like, oh, Charlton Heston died. Oh, that's sad. And then, oh, Leslie Jordan died. Oh, retweet. It's just one of those characters that people connect with for some reason.
But let's all keep tweeting and talking about Kevin. So in 50 years, when something, so he won't call us out. It's like, why'd you just start talking about it? No, we've been pretty.
I don't want
constant.
any tweets when I die. Just put me in the ground.
Actually, that's all I want. I just you guys.
It's
I
just
need
a bunch of
I want a
tweets,
trend.
thousands and thousands
I
of
want a
tweets.
trend. The I got to say I don't. I find it hard to watch a lot of these superhero movies now just because there's so many and it's exhausting. But the Ant-Man one is freaking awesome. And the Galaxy, Guardians of the Galaxy with for the Christmas special looks pretty hilarious. But that's James Gunn, and he's in charge of DC,
DC, yeah.
which is cool. So
Can't be worse than Star Wars Christmas special.
oh yeah. No. I have that on DVD. Somebody had a bootleg.
You're the one.
I'm no, I didn't like buy it. It's like a bootleg. It's like one of the worst things ever. Cool. All right, so we got a fun show today. We got lots of cool stuff. Last week in episode 92, we talked about She-Hulk, The Grinder, Abbott Elementary, and Blackbird. I will say, guys, after Tony Berardo said Blackbird, which I don't think any of us had ever heard of, I'm 2 in. It's 6 episodes.
Very good.
It's so good.
Yeah,
oh my god.
really good.
We're purposely watching it slow just so we don't end it fast. But it's one of the best first episodes, I think, of any series I've ever seen. I just got it's like it really is really good. The guy from what's his name? Kevin from the bad guy.
Taron Egerton.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah, he's great. And the other guy who's that same guy and everything is great. John, whatever his name is, who always plays a person who seems slightly touched.
Ray Liotta is really good, and Greg Kinnear is just like a really good actor. I really enjoy him.
Greg Kinnear has always been good.
He's good. It's but anyway, so check out last week's that review, and then actually go watch it. It is fab. This week we're going to talk about On Patrol Live, Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, and Santa Clarita Diet. All right. Let's kick off with Pink Floyd.
Wait, real quick before we go. I just want to, I know I mentioned it on the, sorry. I know I mentioned it on, in our group chat, but I was trying to review a show, a guy that popped up, and I'll have to, it's TMI_7 is the account on TikTok. He has like 51 Netflix recommendations. I had one popped up for a documentary that he was reviewing called Missing. And the gist of the story for the documentary was a family goes to a magic show. The kid is participates as a volunteer as part of the magic show, their son. They make him disappear. The show ends. Everybody leaves. He's nowhere to be found. they search, the building's closed, nowhere to be found, and it leads to mysteries all over the town, one twist and turn after another. And I'm like, that is a ridiculous documentary. I have to watch. It was fake. That's what this guy does. It's our show, but not, he makes up the storylines of the documentaries.
I think I like that better. We should do.
That's
I know.
awesome. You should
It was-
do that.
We should have an episode. That should be our 100th episode.
Yes, we should. It was fantastic. I couldn't believe it.
That's amazing.
Anyways, yeah, thought it was hysterical. Check that out.
That is awesome. All right. Let's dive into. I'm excited to hear about this. Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah. So, this was served up to me on Amazon Prime actually, and I hadn't been looking for it, and but listen, I don't know if Amazon Prime is talking to my Spotify, but I listen to Pink Floyd all the time. Pink Floyd is one of my absolute all-time favorite rock groups. They have been since I was a kid. I had the privilege to see them live in concert in Milwaukee before they tore down that old stadium that the Brewers used to play in. Pink Floyd's gotten me through some really difficult times in my life. And I when I saw this documentary served up, I was like, I got to go check this out. And what's interesting is that it's an old documentary. It's not new. It's from 2003. It's an 85-minute single episode documentary talking about how the heck Pink Floyd built such an epic LP that, by many accounts changed the recording industry. And it was an interesting story, I have to tell you. It all started in 1971. Oh, before I say this, this was also a difficult review for me. When I told Jeff I wanted to review this documentary, there was a part of me that said, "Fuck Roger Waters. I'm not reviewing anything associated with Roger Waters." So I've had to put that aside, to be very honest with you, because the brilliance of Pink Floyd and the brilliance of the Dark Side cannot be in any way diminished purely because of Roger Waters and his political philosophies. So I just want to say that as from the outset, that I recognize and fully appreciate if you guys listening can't put yourself to look at this because of Roger Waters. I get it. That being said, if you're as big a Pink Floyd fan as I am, there's nothing you could do, man. You got to figure out how this thing was made, and that's what this documentary was about. So it started in 1971. Pink Floyd had just come off of a tour of Britain and Japan and the United States. And Roger Waters, who by many accounts was the heart and soul of Pink Floyd, probably the most talented of the group, made a rather crazy suggestion of, I want to build a completely different kind of album that basically is going to piss everybody off. I want to purposely design these songs, both in content structure and theme, to make people mad. And I want to do it through layers. I want to do it through technology, most of which was new at the time. For 1971, there was some amazingly, cutting edge use of technology to design the album. And that's what they wanted to do. And Roger Waters was able to convince David Gilmour and the rest of the band to join in on this. They were all very enthusiastic about this, coming out off of a very long and exhausting tour. So they were excited about getting in the studio and doing something different. They needed to find somebody who was an unbelievable sound engineer. And who did they find who was unknown at the time? Do you guys know? Alan Parsons.
Oh yeah,
Alan Parsons, who had worked for the Beatles, had worked in the Abbey Road Studios.
Parsons Project.
This was long before the Alan Parsons Project, and Alan Parsons was a young guy that was basically randomly tapped by the studio that the Pink Floyd was using, and it was largely Alan Parsons who was able to create the architecture of so many of the songs that were so exciting. Interesting side note about Alan Parsons is that for as huge of an impact he had on the Dark Side album, he didn't get paid anything. He was like that album.
An intern.
Nothing. It was he was like an intern. He got, he was a kid, and they cut him some awful deal, and I'm sure they probably paid him a little more than minimum wage or whatever it was at the time. I don't know exactly, but I can tell you this: he got no financial benefit. Meanwhile,
Wow.
Dark Side of the Moon made the members of Pink Floyd filthy rich. Remember, this is at a time when people were just buying LPs. LPs were expensive, and bands usually got the lion's share of that revenue. It was those days obviously are long gone, but back then you could get rich off of a single album, and Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, made an unbelievable amount of money off of that. So they did record it with EMI, which was Abbey Road Studios. They recorded it in 1972. They argued and fought. It took months and months for them to come up with each concept for each song on the album. I can tell you this, that each song was specifically designed to be technologically layered. They introduced new voices, and the use of voice technology with echo reverb and some of the other stuff was really cutting edge at the time. And they were able to integrate that into many of the songs. They made famous a number of people that went on to bigger and big things that were going on there. A lot of the revenue and money that came from bought all kinds of things that came out of this, including, get this, the production of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which I found hilarious because that's one of my very favorite movies in the whole world. So now you got my favorite album creating the revenue stream, which created one of my very favorite movies. So that was funded in part through David Gilmour and his revenue share for Pink Floyd. So there were some incredible people that were invited to participate in the cutting of the album, including Chuck Berry and a number of others. There was a number of backup voices that became incredibly influential in the industry. Beatles producer George Martin was involved with the album. So it's just like you have all these incredible influences coming together to produce just this never before seen, never before heard album that I think changed the music industry. As I said, it's Pink Floyd's version of Sgt. Pepper. And
they produced some of with George Martin. They produced some of it at Abbey Road, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. Abbey Road. And then the other thing that I found really interesting was the iconic album cover of the light going through the prism, which is just so absolutely, it's just such the perfect brand for Pink Floyd. And every time I see that album cover, it just takes me back to so many amazing memories. There's no real concept to that. It was just one of their creatives just saying, hey, well, let's just put light through a prism and see what that does. And then they made up as a backstory all the reasons for why light through a prism represents the prism of all the technology that they used on this album. And but wouldn't you think that like going through the prism and that just such the iconic nature of that album would have meant something, but it didn't mean anything. So
everything doesn't mean it's
right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. I always just assume something that big has to have been thought through and designed from the beginning, but in that case, it's not. It is to this date. It still is today one of the top 25 best-selling albums in history.
Does it hold the record for? It did, I think, at one point in time, hold the record for most consecutive weeks in Billboard's top 100 album chart?
I don't have that in front of me, but I wouldn't be surprised at all. It holds all kinds of records, Howard. And here's the thing about that is it's still one of the most reproduced soundtracks in history. It's had multiple versions, different improvements of the sound and the quality. And it just keeps going on. It's this is my own personal opinion, that this music is the kind of music that will be with us forever. It doesn't really stick to any one moment in time. I feel like it great music is always going to be great music, but in this particular case, I feel like this one is just always going to be special and not attached to any particular genre. So This documentary is very well done. It was made in 2003, as I said, I think. So it's almost 20 years old now. But the explanation of where they got some of the effects and how they kind of came into some of the amazing tracks in the album it's really well done how they explain it. And, accepting my personal feelings about Roger Waters, this is a very worthwhile documentary. And if you're into Pink Floyd, if you're into music, and if you're into the, nerding out as to how albums could be put together through sound engineers, this is your documentary, and I highly recommend it. It's on Amazon Prime, 85 minutes. Check it out. I think you'll like it.
Oh,
It was still as late as 2021. It was 43rd on the year-end U.S. top rock albums chart. That's crazy.
It's crazy.
I have a couple questions. One is, this is part of the classic album series, and there's a lot of amazing how the albums got made in this series. We could dive into any numerous ones. So it's a really good series. I'm familiar with that. Did they cover in the Pink Floyd one how they like
the Wizard of Oz?
Wizard of Oz, yeah.
They briefly. So that's such a great question, Jeff. They briefly touched on it. I wish they'd gone deep into it, because they left you with the sense of that just was happenstance.
There's no. It
can't be, right, Howard? You and I.
Yeah.
I've done
for
that.
those that don't,
have you guys all done this?
Don't know,
I've never done it now.
Yeah, for those that don't know, if you play Dark Side of the Moon, the album, and started at the second lion's roar of the Wizard of Oz, it syncs up as an absolute soundtrack, and it's perfect.
It's perfect.
It's a perfect soundtrack.
Yes,
to Wizard of Oz.
I remember sitting in my freshman year dorm in Mosher, Jordan, at the University of Michigan, and we did just that, Howard, and just were blown away by how utterly perfect it is.
What else did you do?
Everything you think.
Mike White says hi, Kevin.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike.
So I will say, and again, Roger Waters, feelings aside, this was many, many, many years ago. Roz, did we do this together? I saw Roger Waters live. Well, I saw Pink Floyd with Jeff Zonder, our friend Jeff Zonder. David Gilmour led Pink Floyd, but I saw Roger Waters.
I saw Roger Waters at the Palace as well,
doing Dark Side of the Moon. That was
2008. Yeah, 2008. Yeah, you might have been with me.
Yeah, I think we went together. And so they literally played the entire album straight through.
That's amazing. Yeah, he did two sets. The first set he did a bunch of random stuff, and then the second took an intermission, and then the second set did Dark Side all the way through. It's pretty amazing.
Do you ever guys?
Now I wouldn't pay a cent to see him.
No, but
of course
back
then, there are certain artists out there, musicians in particular, that you just cannot deny their genius and their talent. And if you ever see them live, like there are some that you'd be like, okay, they have good songs, they have good voice, and it comes together okay. But then there are others that just stand apart as so incredibly genius and talented that it just cannot be denied how good they are. And Roger Waters, fortunately or unfortunately, Roger Waters, I think, is in that bracket. He's just that talented.
It just made me think of that, it's just been a year since a good friend of myself, Ron, and Jeff, Aaron Rubin, passed away. And Aaron was obviously a huge music fan. We went on a whim. We had free tickets, and we went and saw Carole King at Pine Knob Music Theater. And we're blown away. That's one of those artists where you're like, okay, first of all, she wrote every song that was ever a hit between the years 1960 and 1980.
Yeah.
And then just the talent was like
incredible songwriter,
like
incredible
unbelievable genius of songwriting.
Just I will say I have one more Roger Waters thing is since it has to do with Howard, is Radio Chaos is
I still have your CD, I think.
Right, Roger, you do. Radio Chaos is one of my favorite albums. Like I haven't listened to it in like over 10 years, but like in college, I was obsessed with Radio Chaos. Didn't love Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking as much, but that one. Then one day I'm like, where'd happened to my album? I used to listen to this all the time. And Roz had borrowed it
Yeah.
and never gave it back.
Yeah, I still have it.
He perma-borrowed.
Yeah, if you have a CD player still in your car,
I know,
I'm happy to give
exactly.
it back to you.
So, all
That
right.
is a great. That's one of the best albums because I've obviously have downloaded it on Spotify. That is one of the best albums for an airplane when you're listening on headphones. It's perfectly made for headphones.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right. Enough of our inadvertent commercial for Roger Waters.
Yes.
That
dick.
Seriously.
All right, let's do. This is. I saw Kevin Israel talking about this. I said, I've heard of this show. I want to hear all about it, and that's what led to our reunion. Kevin, tell us all about C.
So C is an Apple TV original. It's 3 seasons and done, which is one of my favorite aspects of the show. That they created a story that they worked within a finite time span and they stuck to it. It stars Jason Momoa. It's set in a post-apocalyptic Earth. You don't really know how far in the future it is, but you get the sense that it's a number of centuries in the future. There was apparently something that happened to the human race, and everybody on Earth is now blind. And it's been enough. It's hundreds of years because the sight has become this like almost myth that they know was existed at some point, and they blame sight on the world ending. And so the story basically starts off with people starting to surface who have sight, and they're considered witches. And most of the population hunts them down and kills them because they think that they'll bring about the end of the world again. And that's the big global story, but it's based around Jason Momoa is the head of this, and everybody's living in these very kind of pre-medieval villages and communities. There's no technology, there's no nothing, and so Jason Momoa is the leader of this tribe of people who married this woman who was already pregnant with twins, and the twins are born, and shocker, they can see. And there's people out there hunting them, and there's a lot of intrigue in the show. The show is so incredibly good, and it shocks me that nobody really talks about it, that Jason Momoa hasn't been nominated for anything, because first of all, nobody ever takes Jason Momoa seriously as an actor, and he doesn't really go outside of his range as far as the character goes. He's a big brooding guy who's an amazing warrior, but he plays blind so well. It's astounding. And everybody, credit to the entire cast. Everybody plays blind so well. They create an entire civilization of blind people, an entire logic of how people work, how they communicate, how they, know if somebody walks into the room, how they don't have writing, but they work their way around that. And they don't miss a single detail in this story that you could say, well, okay, but if they're blind, they'd all fall off a cliff or something. Like they cover everything, and it's masterful. And the best thing about it is Jason Momoa is he's a fighter. He fights in all of his parts. He fights as a blind guy, and they basically create like a blind martial arts when these people fight, when all the blind people fight. And I'm just describing it, it sounds like it would probably be funny, but it's amazing to watch. And it's so violent and so believable that if people were blind for centuries and they had to adapt, this is how it would be. The other aspect I really like it is, if you think about it, if you were the only sighted person in a world of blind people, you would essentially be a god. You could do almost anything, and you could move around and nobody would even know you're there. And so it leads to that, which is also why the society believes that sighted people are witches. But they make it so believable that the blind people can actually beat the sighted people because their senses have been so developed over time. The show is just so well done, and there's so much more than that. There's a great amount of intrigue and politics in these different civilizations as they're trying to figure out what to do with the fact that sight is coming back and how they can manipulate it. But the best part of the show is the characters, and goes to the point of what we were talking about earlier. And I'm a true believer that
If you write a great character, you can have that character do anything and your audience will buy into it. And it's almost like the Seinfeld rule. Like Seinfeld truly was about nothing, but they had those great characters that you would just take for a ride, whatever ride they were taking you on, you would go on. And C does a great job of creating every single character you either like or hate as you're supposed to. And you want to know more about them. And they're really three-dimensional, awesome characters. Jason Momoa is so good. His name in the show is Baba Voss. My wife and I decided when if we ever get another dog, he's definitely gonna be named Baba Voss, and nobody will ever know why, and we'll have to explain it forever. But it's just such a great concept for a show. There's no fat in the series. Maybe the first 2-3 episodes are a little slow because they had to establish what's going on. But once the show gets going, it's 3 seasons of just awesome TV. And there's no fat. There's just every episode is great. Every storyline is great. And like I mean, I've watched all of these kinds of shows, Walking Dead, Lost, all these types of shows. And there's always gets to a point where you're like, all right, like enough. All right, we get it. There's undead people, and we get it. Like everybody's a dick. Like, and everybody's horrible. Like, how many seasons of this can you do? And C doesn't do that. So each season is great. Each season has its own story, but connects to the rest of the greater story of the show. And it ended. There was a final ending that was a satisfying ending that you felt good about. And it's just such a great show. And it really disappoints me that it doesn't get as much talk as it deserves, because
I was just gonna. So sorry to interrupt you. I
No,
was
go
just going to ask that. I haven't heard any buzz on this show, and believe me,
it's
Apple
wild.
TV Plus needs buzz on some of their shows. So
it's wild to me. And the other thing is, Twitter loves Jason Momoa. The internet loves Jason Momoa. Jason Momoa is like one of the #1 meme-worthy stars out there. And nobody talks about this show. Everybody talks about Aquaman and all the other stuff he does.
Yeah.
This show was so good, and it's got like some spaghetti western feel to it, but it's also got some Asian way of the samurai feel to it. It's just so good. The tone is so perfect. The villains are fantastic. There's even some villains who redeem themselves, and then you like they do it. They did just such a great job with the show that anybody a woman I work with, we talk about all the shows we watch, and I told her to watch C, and she's like, I've never heard of it. She watched 3 episodes. She's like, oh my God, you're right. This is the best show I've ever. It's just so good. And if you're down with, if you like Game of Thrones, if you like fantasy, if you like post-apocalyptic stuff, Hunger Games type thing, if any of that's in your wheelhouse, I'd even go as far as to say it's got the intrigue of, not necessarily of Sopranos, but there's a lot of like family stuff that goes on. It's just every layer of the show is just so good. And again, it was 3 seasons. You know what you're getting into. It has an end. It's an ending that you go, I'm good with that. Mm-hmm. And it was just great. And Jason Momoa, the whole cast deserves huge kudos. Jason Momoa should definitely get at least a nomination for something. The show's fantastic. The cast is amazing. And the writers just being able, the way they created, I'll beat the dead horse, but they thought of everything, how a blind civilization would get by on literally every account. And it's just awesome. And the main villain in the show, and I'm unfortunately blanking on the actress's name, she is outstanding. You hate her so much. If you watch Game of Thrones, she makes Cersei Lannister look nice. Like, she is
wow.
And she's a psycho. And the woman, I think she's got an accent in real life. I can't remember. She might be Scandinavian or something. But she does this thing that she talks like this. Why would you do that to? And my wife and I always like make fun of her whenever we watch. But it's so creepy. And whenever she's like about to do something horrible, her voice like takes on this higher tone. She just created this character out of nothing. The whole show. If you're listening to this, as soon as you get done listening, seriously, go watch C, because it's some of the best TV that's been created in the past few years.
I'm definitely into it. I've seen it, but the problem, I think there was no context to this big brooding Jason Momoa and the word C. Like, I had no idea what it was, so I had nothing. Like, if I You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes
Yeah.
you see a poster or something, you get some idea. After you describing it, I'm in.
Yeah, they
Sounds
definitely didn't market
fascinating.
it well. There wasn't a lot of promotion put behind it. But any of those, what was it, Quiet Place? Any of those ideas where it's it kind of takes away a sense of yours or something. They couldn't talk and they had to be quiet.
Yeah, but remember how much like Bird Box they went freaking like they marketed the heck out of that.
But that was just a bad movie. That was just bad. It was done.
But it made a ton of money. That crappy movie.
Well, right, because everybody thought there was going to be this great thing, like this great mystery, and it turned out it was just another kind of shitty horror sci-fi movie. And this is really, I mean, they build a whole civilization, and it's a really fun show. The characters are great. They even introduce, and the amazing thing is throughout each season, they keep introducing like new characters. And in the season 3, they introduced a couple new characters. My wife and I were like, really? They're going to introduce new characters now? It's such a weak writer's like crutch. Like, we're running out of things. Here's some new characters. And we loved those characters. Like they didn't drop a ball once in this show. It's outstanding.
I'll have to check it out.
Jerry has a question about the tattoo. So do they talk about does he have tattoos in the show?
Everybody's, and they do it. And also what they do a good job is they don't over explain. Like some things you just have to kind of take. Everybody's got weird piercings. Some people have scars, or it looks like burnt, like brands. Some people do have tattoos, and they don't really ever explain any of it. You just assume that it has something to do with the different tribes or the different, the level they are, or, he's a warrior. So, but they definitely don't over explain everything. They give you just enough. So one of the things they do is they communicate through knots. They'll have strings hanging and you read the knots. It's like hanging braille almost. But they never explain that. You just see it happening and you figure it out. That, they credit the audience to be smart enough to put some of this important stuff together. So no, they never explain any of the tattoos or how you would tattoo somebody without being able to see. But it's everybody's got a very unique look. It was a fun show.
All right, that's awesome.
Nice review. That was cool.
Thank you, Kevin Israel.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Here we go. All right, so let's go to Santa Clarita Diet. Have you guys, anybody seen this?
No, I've never even heard of it.
I've never heard of it.
You've never heard of it? Okay.
I've heard of it. I think my wife started it a little.
Santa Clarita Diet it's a 3-season show as well. Just like C, but it does not have a great ending. It was unceremoniously canceled. So normally I wouldn't suggest a show that got canceled before its time. However, I love this show so much, and I'm still devastated that it got cut off after season 3. This was during that time where Netflix was churning shows all the time, and most Netflix shows didn't make it past 2 or 3 seasons. That was just their model. It's only as of recent, like with Cobra Kai and stuff, where things have 5, 6 seasons. If you think back, not many Netflix shows had much at all. So Santa Clarita Diet was introduced in 2017. It's an American horror comedy. Okay. So it's created by Victor Fresco. It is on Netflix. It stars Drew Barrymore and one of my favorite people, Timothy Olyphant.
Yeah, he's great.
So the idea of this series, and it's a simple series. I will say, if you're going to dive into it, the pilot, you just got to get through the pilot. They hit their legs episode 2 on. Okay. Drew Barrymore is fantastic in this. As a matter of fact, this show was written for her. And when she was about to actually leave kind of entertainment and was so drawn in by the scripts and this idea for the show, she changed her mind and took this gig. And so the idea is Drew Barrymore and Timothy Olyphant are married. They're husband and wife, Joel and Sheila Hammond. They're suburbanites and they're real estate agents, and they live in Santa Clarita. Okay. So in the first season, the first episode, and this isn't giving anything away, Drew Barrymore becomes a zombie. Okay.
Okay.
So she becomes a zombie, and that whole show is how this loving couple with 2 kids has to now make it through the relationship challenge that one of the spouses is a zombie. His wife is undead, but while till death do us part may have applied here.
I might
they're
have a
gonna-
lawsuit. That is very similar to my previous marriage.
Wow.
So that is the
All right.
that is the premise. I will say that Drew Barrymore and Timothy Olyphant as a couple, their banter, they are hilarious. It's worth it. The writing on this show is great. There's a built-in mythology into the show in terms of the how she became a zombie and what it means and the Serbian Nights and all this kind of, there's a whole mythology of there's people that are undead among us and people that hunt them and all this kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
they start to uncover this but it's great. And then the next door neighbor is Skylar Gizando. You've seen him in other stuff. He was in The Righteous Gemstones. You'd recognize him if you saw him. He's like the neighbor. And then Liv Hewson is Drew and Timothy's daughter. And then Mary Elizabeth Ellis is the next door neighbor. She's the mom. There's a lot of people actually from The Grinder, which was my show that I talked about last time, which is another show that got cut off in its prime that I absolutely love. There's 3 people from that series actually in this one. There's a funny ongoing thing with Nathan Fillion. He actually is one of the very first people killed in the series that Drew Barrymore kills to eat. And then they feel guilty after burying him because they realize they've turned him into a zombie, an undead. And so they just have his head in the basement. And so it's just literally Nathan Fillion's head is a character in this show. And then that's for season like 1 and 2. And then they got away with Alan Tudyk taking over in season 3 because at this point it's so
Oh, if Alan Tudyk took over?
yeah, but
That's so funny.
it's so right, the Firefly,
Yeah.
all the Firefly stuff, but because his face is so decrepit at that point, that they got away with it. They got away with it. But of course, I mean, you're suspending your disbelief anyway at this point. But it's so great. I will say the interesting thing about this, because this is the time I'm watching The Walking Dead at that time. I haven't watched it in years now, but the killing scenes in Santa Clarita Diet, get it, by the way, Santa Clarita Diet.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
Clever, right? The killing scenes in this put anything you've seen in The Walking Dead to shame.
Mm.
To shame. When because I would watch this with my wife, and she literally could not watch the scenes where Drew Barrymore would kill someone to eat them, or they would have to kill. They are that violent, which is weird because it's a comedy, right? But that aside, I didn't mind it. But that aside, it was interesting. So, sorry.
So how long are these episodes, Jeff?
I think they're just 30-minute episodes. There's only 30, right? It was like 10 a season. And then that was the whole thing. It was interesting. Like it ended on a cliffhanger. So it doesn't seem like they intended it to end. And it ended. And it trended, and people were like, the fans of the show made a thing about it, but you never saw the stars talking about it. You never really saw anyone kind of, who was in it complaining about it. And I'm telling you, it was great. It was like, you'd think if like this was something like Drew Barrymore was amazing, Timothy Olyphant was incredible, like everybody was in this. Ethan Suplee and
I love Ethan
Alice.
Suplee.
I mean, like Andy Richter. I mean, there's just so many great side characters to this as well, and it was just so thoroughly I like. It's one of those shows that maybe I'll review one day as well. Another one that I love that got canceled and they never gave it its due was Last Man on Earth, Will Forte's show. Love
Oh,
that
yeah.
show. And so, this one though, is disappointing. I caught on late, like maybe season 2. And then, here's the interesting thing. The interesting thing is like the first year with the critics, it got like a 78% on Rotten Tomatoes, right? I think, but then it got 89% in the second season and 100% in the third season. And then they canceled it.
Wow.
So I mean, it's by the time it was in the third season, I'm telling you, after the first episode, I mean, they knew these characters and the banter and everything was amazing. But by the third season, I mean, it was just there was certain scenes that were just so hilarious. I mean, it was so great. So for that reason, I am suggesting you go watch it, even though it does end, and you're gonna wish there were more. It was good enough, great enough, even that it's worth investing the time if you're looking for some good entertainment, especially if you like Drew Barrymore, and especially if you love, which I do, Timothy Oliphant. So
Nice.
I was
Nice.
just Googling why did they cancel this show, and they seem to be attributing it to Netflix's what they call cost plus budget model, where they pay for the show's production up front, but then there's a premium of 30% on top of it, and then each renewal it gets bigger. So basically, the show gets much more expensive by the time the third season rolls around. So maybe that's a different kind of contract than they have with other types of shows that they develop.
I think early on, yeah, because I think you saw a lot of there's no old Netflix shows that I think were many seasons.
Yeah.
That's like a new thing. That's a new
Yeah.
thing for them. So, all right. So check that out. And then we got one more show for you. We got On Patrol Live.
Yeah. So, okay. So, first, just start with a little history, which is one of the longest running shows still on television, live action shows still on television, is Cops. Cops has been on TV, believe it or not, since 1989. It's crazy. Cops is a little bit edited and packaged and obviously thrown out there to make it look like, even nuttier than it really may be. Over the past, I think it was probably about 6 or 7 years ago, it started. The folks at A&E who've run Cops forever created this show called Live PD, which, for those of you that are sports fans or NFL fans and have seen the NFL Red Zone as an example, where they go back and forth between plays and various games. Live PD was basically a combination of Cops and the NFL Red Zone channel, right? They had 7 or 8 police departments across the country that they had a producer and a cameraman riding in patrol cars with officers on a delay of about at least 15 minutes to a half hour, just God forbid, in case something happened with an officer shooting or something like that. But what the producer being in the car allowed them to do is to radio or, connect with the host, Dan Abrams, who's a commentator on a lot of other shows, network shows, and let him know that, hey, there's lights flashing. We're about to make a traffic stop in whatever location. And from there, they showed bits and they'd show live essentially to the audience what was happening on the stop. Sometimes it's nothing more than somebody being pulled over for their license plate being expired and nothing major happens. Other times they get a report of home invasions that are literally, they catch somebody coming out of a house. It's all kinds of stories like that. So Live PD was a great show. It did a couple of things. It made huge cult heroes of a bunch of officers. It made huge cult heroes of a bunch of departments. Live PD ran until the middle of 2020 with all the protests against police, which was half of the story. Obviously, there was a lot of blowback, certainly. But then also at the same time, there was blowback amongst one of the departments that was involved in Live PD for a stop that was partially shown on air that a bunch of officers were under investigation for. So A&E decided, no, we're canceling it. And that was that. It was done. This year, the Reels channel, that's Reelz, you may have to look deep on your cable to find it, but it's out there.
I've
It is
seen that.
also,
I've seen it.
yeah, it's streaming on a bunch of the streaming services, Sling and Dish and all those kind of things. They brought back a show or created a show called On Patrol Live. It is the same host, the same two officers, one of who's the same, who are experts, basically your color commentators, being experts on law enforcement, in the studio with the host. The music is the same. Some of the departments are the same, which was great. Like, again, like I mentioned. So I mentioned that I'll just finish what the show is. And basically what it is the same thing. There's 8 departments on a show. It airs live Friday and Saturday evenings, East Coast time from 9 p.m. until midnight. It is so fascinating and enthralling because it's live. And there are, like I said, you get drawn into some of these departments and characters. When my wife and I watched the first couple of shows of this new show, we were so excited to see some of the officers. There's one of the officers who's become an absolute star. 2 of them, I have a picture that Jeff has. One's named Garrow Brown, who is from Richland County, South Carolina. He's a sheriff. And the other is Addie Perez, who's sort of the hottie of everybody. There was this past week, one criminal that they had stopped who was pulled over was like, "Where's that Addie Perez? How come she didn't pull me over? She's fine as hell." It was the funniest thing. Look at the size of Garrow Brown. He is the most massive human you've ever seen. And we've watched people that he's standing in front of, pulled out of a car, try and run from him. Like, are you out of your mind? He's like, it's crazy. So it's created characters out of these guys. There's a guy in Nye County, Nevada, which for those of you who've played Grand Theft Auto, Nye County, Nevada is the equivalent of GTA 5. I think it was at the last one, the area in the desert area that was all meth and airstrips. That's Nye County, Nevada. But the other part of it that's so fun is like the Carmen created drinking game for crossing the streams. There are patterns that and are absolutely excited when they happen because you can see them coming every show and you jump for joy when you see them happen. Things that I have learned from these traffic stops. First of all, the amount of people that run in their cars from simple traffic stops, I never knew it was like you'd see a report on the news. It was a multi-car chase. It went for 15 miles, constantly running. And again, you're seeing this live. These are not edited. You're seeing them pull over a car or light up a car and the car slowing down, but not stopping. And you're like, he's going to run. I know he's going to run. And boom,
runner. We got a runner.
And then it's funny when some of them run, but they still signal when they turn left or right, which is even funnier. It's like, well, at least he's not getting traffic violations added on. So that's one. When they pull them over and say it's a progression. Do you have anything in the car that you shouldn't have? Guns, weapons, drugs. No, got nothing in the car. And then 5 minutes later, they say, "Are you sure you have nothing in the car?" Okay, There's a little weed in the car. Like, okay, we can work with that if there's a little weed in the car. That's all, though, right? That's all. And then they search the car because there is a little weed. And of course, it turns out they have a pound of crystal meth in the car. It's like,
There's always a crack pipe.
There's
Always a crack pipe.
Always a crack pipe. Always a paraphernalia of some kind. The third one is if they ask somebody, have you had anything to drink tonight? I did have a little bit to drink tonight. It was about 3 or 4 hours. It was always 3 or 4 hours earlier. And how much did you have to drink? Always, it's 1 or 2 drinks. And you can always triple in your head whatever they said, because you're like, dude, you can't stand up. You had more than 1 or 2 drinks, or you're the biggest lightweight of all time. The amazing thing that we've discovered, nobody on this show, nobody that gets pulled over in any of these counties ever has their ID on them. I freak out if I don't have my driver's license in my wallet when I leave the house. None of these people ever have their license. And 50 to 60% of the people who never have their license on them, it's irrelevant anyways, because their license was suspended 9 years ago. One guy this week, he said, your license has been suspended. I know, I always get stopped for it. Then why are you driving? Well, I got to get to work. What am I supposed to do? Get your license.
Fair point. Fair point.
Good point. All these people that have used cars, for some reason, they never have bought the used car from an actual used car lot, a dealership. They bought it from some guy in a lot at the corner of whatever.
Whose name you never know.
Whose name it was? I don't know the guy's name. So that bag of weed, that wasn't mine. That might have been there in the car. I don't know. And then it's just crazy how often that stuff happens. So we are addicted. We record it on our DVR every week. And then we watch it like about 45 minutes after it starts so we can blow through commercials. But we get upset if we don't actually get to watch it live. If not, we have to watch it first thing the next morning. They've added a show called On Patrol First Shift at 8 p.m. an hour before, which is only really worth it to watch the first 10 or 15 minutes. The first 10 or 15 minutes, they'll give you updates on stories that may not have finished from the week before, or if it's Saturday night, from Friday night before, which is actually pretty good because there's been some stories they just added Toledo, Ohio as a department a couple weeks ago, and live during their first night, the first episode or first story ever from Toledo was live. There was a shooting outside a high school football game. And they were responding to that live. They usually have 2 or 3 cars from each department, and all of them were obviously responding to the shooting. And you're like, holy cow, that's pretty amazing. So they do follow up on those stories. The other thing that they do every week is they do a crime of the week, which is just a fun, interesting story, but they'll also do a wanted section. And what they've really done with On Patrol Live is they've done an amazing job integrating social media. So people are tweeting along with the show, which is fantastic. And, this past week or 2 weeks ago, they kept showing, which was kind of a funny an animal interest story, a kitten that was stuck in the wheel, wouldn't come out of the wheel well of a car. And they kind of were joking around, and one of the deputies had to do it, but they finally got it out. And a vet tech who was watching the show called into the sheriff's department, and she came and claimed the kitten and made sure it was okay and got it taken care of. So social media has become a huge part of it. The wanted section they do every week, they're catching legitimate, it's all kind of like America's Most Wanted, just in one small section, but they're catching legit criminals. There's also every week there's a missing of a kid or somebody that's disappeared, and those have been really fruitful as well because of the following of the show. So I cannot recommend this strongly enough. It is cult-like. It is fascinating, and it's really, really, really entertaining to see happen. So Reels, Friday and Saturday nights, 9 to midnight Eastern time. I cannot recommend it enough.
All right.
You seem very enthusiastic about that one, Howard.
We love
Yeah.
it. You know, Ron's cousin and mine and Jeff's old friend Dan was living with my wife and I for the last few months, and we turned him into an addict as well. That was our Friday and Saturday nights, was sitting down and getting a pizza and watching that show, and it's fantastic.
Fred, I'm
That's,
out those myself, big guy. Listen, they're not as inspiring as you are, but they're mine.
All right. Well, this was an awesome episode. Kevin Israel, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes,
Thank you,
nicely
Kevin.
done, Kevin. Yeah.
Thanks for having me back.
Every-
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Everybody
you.
go out and
CC.
CC.
Do you have a website, Kevin? Well,
I do.
have a comedy
KevinIsrael.com for KevinIsrael.com is for my has all my dates and whatnot.
very cool.
Nice.
Check out Kevin if he's in your town. Ron, say goodnight.
Good night. I'm back in the air Monday night on Delta Airlines back down to New Orleans for the holiday, for Halloween, unfortunately, this year.
Oh,
So
nice.
I'll be back with a review on the back of the seat in front of me. So looking forward to it.
Awesome. Roz, say goodnight.
Good night. Go Blue.
Go blue. That's right.
Good night, everybody. We'll see you next time. And every
Peace out.
time when we cross more streams. What? And that has been another episode of Crossing the Streams. Join us every Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, live on Facebook and YouTube. Follow the Jeff DeWaskin Show on YouTube to be alerted every time we go live with your hosts, Jeff DeWaskin, Ron Lippett, Howard Rosner, Bob Phillips, Sal D'Amelio. We're all in the socials. Follow us, listen to our podcasts, Classic Conversations, and the Sal and Bob Show. Check them all out, and we'll see you next week and every week when we cross more streams right here. See you then.